안녕하십니까. 3월 24일 목요일 영국의 소리방송 빅타임입니다. 오늘은 러시아가 우크라이나를 침공한 지 꼭 한 달째 되는 날입니다. 전국의 도시들은 완전히 폐허가 되어가고 있는 우크라이나의 현실과 그럼에도 불구하고 전투 자체에서는 괄목할 만한 전공을 올리고 있는 우크라이나 군대의 활동을 영상으로 보여드리겠습니다. 첫 소식은 드론으로 촬영한 마리우폴시의 폐허가 된 모습입니다. 둘째 소식입니다. 러시아의 전함이 우크라이나 특수부대의 활약으로 폭발하여 함대원은 물론 배 자체가 화염에 쌓였습니다. 셋째 소식은 러시아 탱크들이 불타는 모습입니다.
Двинулась колона в сторону Києва. Колона була велика, була організована засідка, була розбита голова колони. По попереднім даним, в голові колони був командир 6-го танкового полка, який був знищений. Хлопці відпрацювали засаду дуже професійно і
네 번째 소식입니다. 그럼 우크라이나 전쟁이 어떻게 끝날 수 있는지 서방 언론들이 보는 견해입니다.
It happened. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in defiance of Western warnings about incurring unprecedented sanctions, sent his warplanes, soldiers and tanks to attack Ukraine. The big question is what will happen next? There are multiple possible scenarios, from an outright win for either side to a new world war where everyone loses. At one end, President Putin's invasion topples the government of Volodymyr Zelensky, and Moscow then imposes a puppet regime. This new administration turns the nation firmly eastwards, rejecting previous desires to join the European Union and the NATO Defence Alliance, both red lines for the Kremlin.
Я запитав сьогодні у 27 лідерів Європи, чи буде Україна в НАТО. Запитав прямо. Всі бояться, не відповідають.
Moscow attempts to mitigate the impact of the West's punitive sanctions, forging ever closer ties to the world's largest authoritarian power, China. President Xi Jinping would doubtless be inspired to plan his next move on Taiwan. The West is left looking diminished, with its values under threat, and this could well spell the dawn of a new era where great powers impose their will over weaker rivals. A second scenario is only marginally less bleak from a Western and Ukrainian perspective. Putin succeeds in taking and holding Ukraine's entire coastline, stretching along the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, cutting off the country's ability to export. It cripples the economy, leaving a rump state to be ruled by a weakened government in Kyiv. An east-west German-style divide would then cut through Europe. All parts of Ukraine under government control would be able to build closer ties with Western allies, while the other part of the country would be absorbed back into the Russian sphere of influence. Then there is the very real possibility of a powerful and effective Ukrainian resistance to counter any Russian occupation or Russia-controlled government. That would drag Moscow into a protracted guerrilla war in Ukraine, triggering discontent in Russia as the number of Russian soldiers killed and wounded grows, along with the financial cost of the mission.
С Антоном Палкиным, прекрасный человек, спортсмен отличный, добрейший еще души человек, никогда никому зла не желал.
This is a situation that ultimately threatens President Putin's power. It would require Western allies to support Ukraine by arming, training and offering other forms of covert help to whatever resistance force emerges. The West would also need significantly to increase investment in their respective armed forces after decades of neglect. Only with the capability and willingness to use force can they hope to be able to push back against authoritarian threats, as has been demonstrated by events in Ukraine. It's much harder to attack than to defend, meaning that if Ukraine's armed forces can hold out against the Russian invaders, they have a chance of beating them back, or at least ensuring that any Russian victory comes at the highest possible price in terms of soldiers lost. Despite being outgunned, the Ukrainian military is far better trained and equipped than when Russia first challenged this country with the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Boosting their chances is a steady flow of weapons and ammunition from a growing group of allies from the US and the UK to previously more reluctant states like Germany.
Was wir auf jeden Fall brauchen, ist schnelle Reaktionsfähigkeit, dass all unsere Verbündeten wissen, in dem Moment, wo es zu einer Bedrohungssituation käme, können sie sich darauf verlassen, dass ihre Verbündeten da sind, zu ihnen stehen.
Ukraine is putting up a strong fight in the north, east and south, slowing and even halting in places the Russian advance. As President Putin has taken the extraordinary step of ordering the invasion, it's hard to imagine he could allow it to fail. But if Ukraine's troops are able to hold the line, then they can make the move so costly that the Russian leader's own authority at home is destroyed and his war fails. Finally, there's a chance that the escalating violence in Ukraine prompts Western allies to intervene directly in the conflict militarily. They're already providing things like anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons to the armed forces, but the Ukrainian government is increasingly calling on the West to impose a no-fly zone.
Якби були відкриті, якби це було чесно, то нам не довелось би 20 днів переконувати Альянс, щоб небо над нашою державою було закрито. Закрите від смерті, яку несуть російські повітряні сили.
Western jets would then have to shoot Russian aircraft out the sky and destroy Russian air defense systems, putting the two nuclear-armed sides into direct military confrontation for the first time.
A no-fly zone means that you're in a conflict with Russia. Again, our position remains that we're not going to do that.
That scenario could lead to an uncontrollable escalation in the conflict far beyond Ukraine's borders, possibly even triggering the Third World War.
다섯 번째는 푸틴의 아킬레스 힐은 러시아 군인들의 사망자 숫자가 급등하고 있다는 소식입니다. 어제 현재 러시아 군인은 4명의 사단장급 장성을 포함 15,000여 명이 사망하였고 6,000여 명의 병사가 부상병이 발생한 것으로 알려졌습니다. 열악한 무기에도 불구하고 우크라이나 병사 사망자는 1,000명 미만인 것으로 알려지고 있습니다.
Nearly 43 years ago, Moscow ordered troops into Afghanistan. Over the following decade, some 15,000 Soviet Red Army soldiers would die there. Their war and eventual retreat led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Today, the death toll of Russian troops in Ukraine could already match those killed over 10 years in Afghanistan. 498 dead in the first week of war, according to Russia's defense ministry. And despite no update since, NATO officials say after a month of fighting, the Russian death toll is now as many as 15,000. Across dozens of Russian cities, more than 15,000 people have been arrested for protesting the war. Recently, anxious parents of troops have begun showing up. Putin's Achilles heel is the perception soldiers are dying unnecessarily.
Священного Писания.
It's why his tightened reporting laws unswamped Russia with Kremlin propaganda. And it's why the Ukrainian military shows off battlefield gains, like knocking out Russian tanks or captured Russian soldiers, because they know bad press back home is what got the Red Army out of Afghanistan.
여섯 번째 소식입니다. 영국 보리스 수상은 서방 국가들의 지원을 한 등급 올려야 한다고 주장했습니다. 그렇다고 당장 전투병력을 파송하자는 말은 아니지만 무기의 질을 높이고 예상되는 화학무기, 핵물질 무기에 대항할 수 있는 장비를 보내야 한다는 주장입니다.
He wants to see a peaceful, negotiated outcome if that were possible, but Vladimir Putin is plainly determined to double down on his path of violence and aggression. Absolutely brutal way he's treating the Ukrainian people. We've got to step up. We've got to increase our support, and we've got to tighten the economic vice around Putin, sanctioning more people today as we are, sanctioning the Wagner Group, looking at what we can do to stop Putin using his gold reserves.
오늘 방송을 마치겠습니다. 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다.